So today I'm here with Danielle Gray. Excuse my voice, by the way, I just came down with a cold, but she's also known as the Style and Beauty Doc. She has a huge social media following, over 100,000 followers on Instagram, and she's got about 175, maybe just a hair under, 175,000 YouTube subscribers. And, you know, she calls herself the Style and Beauty Doc because I see that she talks a lot about things like skincare, hair care, general subjects pertaining to beauty and sort of trends that are happening today in the beauty industry. And it's great to have her here.
Thank you.
And today I think we'll just talk a little bit about that. First of all, my first question for you actually is, I'm a little curious, are you actually a doctor of some sort?
Well, I am one on the internet. What I do is, the funny thing about the name, I've been online since 2007, before there was the influx of dermatologists and plastic surgeons and dentists and everybody in the medical profession doing videos. So it can be a little confusing. But what I do, I like to think of myself as kind of like the in-between. So I can take the things that people in your industry say, the medical jargon and the big words and things that the common person doesn't understand, and I can break it down in a way that's hopefully entertaining and educational so that the regular person can understand.
That's actually what I wanted to say too, is that, so what I liked so much about your channel is that, number one, you add so much humor to it. I mean, everything's done with, total humor, and it's super funny, which is great. Keeps it entertaining, keeps people wanting to watch. But what I thought was super interesting, and one of the reasons why I thought maybe there was some medical background, is that, when you talk about different subjects, you look at things with a somewhat skeptical or critical lens, which is exactly what you should be doing, at least if you're in the medical field, because there's so many, trends and things that come out, skin creams and devices and everything, and the public has no idea what is works and what doesn't work. And from what I've seen of what you're doing, you're not just jumping on to every fad. You're kind of saying like, hey, is this worth the hype and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I like to pride myself in, being very smart. And I do my homework when it comes to things. So I know that how easy it is for someone to get kind of caught up with a lot of the misinformation that's out there that comes from lay people, it comes from brands, and unfortunately sometimes it also comes from people in the medical profession as well too.
100%,
So
100%.
For me, it's really doing my homework. I've been very much into skincare since I got my start. Back in the day, back in my day when I first started out, before we were even called influencers, we were called bloggers or YouTubers. I would get invited to a lot of events where the brands would have plastic surgeons, they would have dermatologists. So I would pick their brains. As a matter of fact, sometimes even for like personal gain, like when I had under eye hollows and I really wanted to know like, what should I do for like 7 years straight? Every time I met up with a dermatologist, I was like, what can I do for the hollows underneath my eyes? So it was like my own little like research.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's how you, I wondered, so that's how you sort of just self-educated and pick the brains of people who know. You're obviously doing something right, because that skin is flawless.
Well, and then also I'm currently getting some technical training. I'm in a cosmetic science program at Spelman, so I can learn more about what ingredients. Well, I know a lot about ingredients already, but I wanted to be able to have like that science background.
I was going to say, you have to have a little bit of sort of a biological or science background in order to know what you're talking about, and you certainly seem to know what you're talking about. So where did that come from?
I'm a nerd. I wasn't the most popular person in school, but I went to schools for gifted children, and I just had a thirst for knowledge, and that's something that just kind of took on in my adult life. So it's like I always need to know the why and the pros and the cons of things.
How it works, that kind of thing. So what are some of your favorite skincare products? I mean, just tell me about your regimen, maybe. Actually, like, what do you use? Because this is what patients ask me all the time. Like, what should I do for cleanser? What should I do for moisturizer? And these are the main things: cleanser, moisturizer,
Sunscreen, of course. Yes,
exactly.
yes.
Yeah.
So anytime anybody asks me about my skincare routine, I always give a very generic answer because I kind of feel like people cheat and they're like, all right, well, your skin looks good. What do you use? I want to use what you use.
Right.
And it's not, it's obviously not that cut and dry. But what I do, a gentle cleanser, an antioxidant, and a sunscreen during the day. And gentle cleanser again, retinoid at night. I currently use tretinoin, a prescription that I got from my dermatologist, but then I also have something from an online agency that I use. A couple times a week, I'll exfoliate. And then I'm no stranger to going to my dermatologist to, get a couple of tweaks, a little filler here, a little Botox there, some RF microneedling. Like I'll try almost anything. I've also realized certain things. Like there's what they call in my family the Morgan face, which is my grandfather who passed away in 2006. It's like the jowling that occurs, and I'm not even quite sure at what age it starts. But my mom has it, her sister has it, of course my grandfather had it, I'm pretty sure his mom had it. So there's certain things that I'm like, okay, that's more than likely going to happen to me. What can I do to kind of counteract that?
Right.
Things like, sunscreen and I don't know, maybe I might need to see you for a facelift later on.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think you're anywhere near that. And seriously, and I think that has a lot to do with genetics for sure. It's interesting because people always ask me too, they say, what products? And, because of what you do, you don't have to name brands and things like that. But what I find really interesting is that, I think people are sort of hung up on, do I need the $200 moisturizer or do I need the drugstore moisturizer, for example? And I tell everybody I use Neutrogena, which costs me $15 at the grocery store. I think that so many of these expensive moisturizers and products in general have things that are sort of purported to help, but it's kind of like what you were saying before. I mean, are they really doing anything? And one of those big things that everyone talks about today, for example, is like putting hyaluronic acid in products. And when I see commercials like that, it kind of drives me nuts a little bit because the real question is how much is the hyaluronic acid actually helping?
Right.
And I guess I'm curious. I mean, I know the answer. This is what I do for a living. I'm curious what your thoughts are as someone who isn't a dermatologist or a plastic surgeon, because I want to know what you've sort of gleaned from everything you hear out there.
They're all lying to us now.
Pretty much.
I think the way I explain it to people, because people are always like, there's this misconception that if you pay more for skincare, that it's going to do all these amazing things.
Exactly.
And me as someone, again, I dibble dabble. Well, I do a little more than dibble dabble. I would say I kind of slide all the way in when it comes to cosmetic procedures. I understand that there's certain things that skin can do, that skincare can do for skin, and then there's certain things that skincare can't do for skin. Right. So it's hard because I'm always constantly having to combat that, especially in my content and in some of the feedback that I'll get in the comments, because people are fed dreams about, especially the under eye area. People are fed dreams that if you just find the right eye cream, then you'll look refreshed and you'll be your volume issues will disappear and you'll just look amazing. You'll look 10 years younger. And it's like, eye creams serve a purpose, especially for if you've got some texture. The under eye area can be a little dry sometimes. Some people may need, but you could just use your facial moisturizer for that. But some people may have different needs. So like, for instance, I have oily skin, but my under eye is a little dry. So I might sometimes use a separate eye cream for that reason. But I also understand, and I really try to drive the point home with my audience, is that, okay, I had under eye hollows when I was from like 5 up until, but they got progressively worse as I got older. And there was no eye cream. Like I tell people this all the time, there is no eye cream out there that would have gotten me back the volume that filler did.
I was going to say, so what have you done? Because your volume's perfect there.
Well, filler.
All right. Got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Fine.
yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. So, and for me, to me, like obviously look the same because I haven't done anything that drastic, but it definitely changed my look for me. I can confidently say that at 42, I look younger than I did when I was 32. And that's a number of things. That's a number of things. It's the under eye hollows that I had back then. It's the way that I styled myself. Probably have more self-confidence now, so probably hold myself a little. And I'm a little bit more unserious than I was back then.
Oh,
so I
really?
think that kind of gives off the vibe that maybe I'm not as old as I actually am.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think consumers are fed dreams about the efficacy of products. And I tell people there's a place for every product in the market. The drugstore skincare was not great when I was a teenager in the 90s. You had Seabreeze and I don't want to name names, but there were some things out there that weren't great. We have so much better drugstore skincare now. And as a matter of fact, I would probably trust more of the drugstore skincare brands because, they're owned by big companies that have the money to do the research and development and to be able to know that these ingredients are what is actually helping with the skincare. Yep. But there's also a place for the $200 moisturizer because some people just love the way, like, maybe it's a sensorial experience that they're having when they open up the jar and it smells a certain way and it feels a certain way. And you don't want to take that away from someone.
Absolutely. And couldn't agree with you more. I think for me, because I'm one of those people, I don't like to sell snake oil. That's what I always say. And if, not everybody that comes to see me has $200 for a moisturizer. Right. And so I just want them to know that I don't necessarily think that you're missing out terribly if you can't afford that, because you can do the things that you need to do with, lesser expensive versions of those products. Yeah,
for sure. Especially nowadays, you've got Korean beauty, you've got Japanese beauty. Again, the drugstore, the masstige market has expanded so much now that there's just so many better options now than there were back in my day.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. So, I happen to have two young daughters, one of which is 11, 11 and a half. And she is already concerned about her skincare. And to be perfectly honest with you, yes, I'm a plastic surgeon, but the last thing I want is my kids to be conscious about these sorts of things, right? Especially at that age. And my wife is also a physician. I don't know if you know that. But, we've been trying to tell her that, first of all, you don't need anything at 11. And I'm curious what your thoughts, and do you ever get questions from, younger people on your YouTube and your social media?
Well, for one, they're not going to listen to us because we're old, right? Yeah. So no matter what we say, they're like, you're old, you don't know. But there is this phenomenon now where they call them Sephora 10-year-olds or the Sephora tweens that went on, people were talking about it on TikTok, like people shopping, they're like, scared of these kids because they're like running rabid throughout Sephora. There's the people who work at Sephora who have to like clean up the messes that they make because they're looking at expensive skincare like Drunk Elephant, and Drunk Elephant has a philosophy of being able to mix together products to make like these smoothies. So they're kids. Of course they're gonna go in there and they make their little smoothies and they're making like a huge mess, and there's like a whole thing on social media. Recently a video went viral where a 14-year-old showed up her skincare routine to prevent the signs of aging, like at 14. And to be honest, I took offense to that because I'm like, what is it about people like in our generation that they look at us and they're like, ooh, I don't want to look like that.
I saw your video like that the other day. Yeah, I hear you.
I'm like, I'm a little offended.
You know what though? I'm not so sure it's that they think that about our generation as it is that kids have gotten so self-conscious.
And they don't have their own spaces.
They don't have their own spaces. And I think a lot of that self-consciousness comes from just social media and in the pressures and what they're seeing around them. And of course, my kids are growing up in New York City where, growing up, they're just super precocious, right? They're like way ahead in everything. Whereas, I grew up in upstate New York and I don't even think I knew what,
Well, at least you're not bringing them up in the 80s and 90s because it was rough here.
Yeah. Here in New York in the 80s and 90s. Yeah.
Rough. Yeah. But the thing is with parents, it's like you can prevent your kids from looking at things on social media. You can say that they're not allowed to look at TikTok or have a TikTok account. But you know what? They're going to go in school, and the kids at school who do look at that stuff, they're still going to wind up getting influenced. It's hard because as a parent, now not only do you have to monitor what your kids are watching on social media, but now you got to like basically get a degree in dermatology to figure out what these products do because these kids are looking at things that have retinol, that have exfoliating acids in them,
right.
and these are things that could injure their skin
That's
and
right.
interfere with their skin barrier. So it's
So let
like,
me ask you this though, because
yeah.
because you're an expert. Do you think that there are certain, even if it's just daily cleanser, do you think there's something like that 11, 12-year-olds could
Yeah,
do?
because I had a skincare routine when I was 10. I mean, it only consisted of Noxzema and some sort of moisturizer or something. I don't think I was wearing sunscreen just yet at 10. But now that with everything that we know about sunscreen and sun protection and the harmful UV rays and what that can do to the skin, definitely kids should be wearing a sunscreen, a very gentle cleanser, and then let kids have fun with it because there's all kinds of like really cool products that can foam up. Maybe they turn colors. Maybe they have a certain scent.
Okay, so another question I have for you is, I'm actually not so much on social media and watching what the celebrities and things are doing. I'm usually in the country chopping down trees and things like that on the weekends. But at this point in my life, not so much into the pop culture. But tell me what it is that you're seeing out there in terms of trends and interesting things, and maybe even things that you find like totally off the wall that could be out there.
It's hard to call something a trend because to me it just seems weird, like especially when you're modifying your body or your face in some way for it to be a trend, but yet they are trends. Like there was the whole buccal fat removal thing that people talked about like incessantly last year. What else have I seen? Just recently, what's that girl's name? What is her name? Kylie Jenner. Kylie Jenner.
yeah.
So of course, the Jenner Kardashians. They're always doing something to be talked about or just stay in the news cycle. But recently, and there's not a lot of the work that she's admitted to. I think she may be admitted to getting lip filler, after the fact. But you can kind of, look at the face and tell that something's been done. But recently she was at Paris Fashion Week.
Excuse me.
And people were like, she paid all that money to look better, and now she looks 40, which again, like, why y'all taking jabs at the olds, right? Like, but
Being 40, right? Yeah.
but of course you don't want to look 40 when I don't know how old she is. She's like 26 or
yeah.
27. But yeah, she had like this kind of puffy look to her, and I actually wanted to ask you a couple questions about that. Like what? Well,
So-
I kind of know what causes it, but
Yeah. So I looked at some photos of her online, and let me start by saying, who knows what's being posted online, right? Sometimes people doctor things to make people look even worse than they are, just to say, hey, look what happened to this celebrity. So all I can talk about is what the photos that I saw, whether they've been altered or not, I have no idea. But what I did see is it looked like she had a really strong jawline. All of a sudden, this part was really augmented and sharp, and and it kind of makes sense because that's been a real trend, if you will. Jawline filler, jawline contouring. There's only two ways to change the jawline. One is with fillers, and the other is with surgery, and that's typically involves implants, things like that. And that's a heck of an operation that not a lot of people undergo jawline implants. The recovery's rough, and it's potentially fraught with complications because those implants go in through the mouth, they can get infected, all that kind of thing. So, but my guess is that she probably had filler jawline contouring, and I'm not commenting on whether it looked good or bad on her, but what I will say is that it completely changed the proportions of her face. And when you do that, and this is what I tell my patients all the time, because everyone comes in, what do I need? What do I need? And it'll be someone with like great volume like you, do I need filler? And the answer is no, because you're going to start to, unless you want to change the proportions. But the thing is the minute you do that, that's when you become either unrecognizable or someone that people say, what are they doing? What are they doing? Because people know what you look like, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing is, I think that she probably had filler here in the cheekbone area because that's very common. And so you want to highlight this, people want to highlight their jaw, but when you augment those areas beyond where you ever had them from birth, Now you've changed the natural proportions of your face, and that's when it starts to look sort of
like
done,
off,
obvious
yeah.
that something's gone on.
Yeah. And that's true to your point that you're not quite sure if things could be doctored or filtered. They're really known for using a lot of these filters on top of the enhancements that they get. So I kind of thought of it. I didn't have a really good opportunity to kind of like compare it to like previous pictures. But I think sometimes what happens is because they use filters so much that when they're caught without the filter, it almost looks as if like, oh my God, there was some sort of deformity or the procedure went
Just
wrong.
so you know, the picture I was commenting on wasn't one like that she took. It was
Like
clearly somebody,
yeah.
like paparazzi, and who knows if they're altering them to make them actually look
and that
weirder
can happen too. Yeah. So there's been a lot of talk about filler. I talk about it myself. I'm someone who used it to fill my tear trough. I've used it also for my cheeks as well. But a lot of plastic surgeons don't seem to love filler.
Really?
Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, let me say this. There's about 3 things that I do in my practice: surgery, Botox and fillers, and some lasers. And the reason I do them is because they actually work. And the reason I don't do everything else, so name every machine under the sun, I probably don't have it, is because I don't think that most of those things work, or at least work very significantly, right? So Botox and fillers definitely have a very legitimate role in facial rejuvenation. But of course, like everything, it's got to be done in the right situation, on the right patient, that kind of thing. If you ask me, like, what do I think of fillers in general? I mean, great for the right thing, right? So again, if someone like yourself came in and said, Doc, I need to look younger, I need fillers, I'd say, you don't need fillers because you've already got enough volume in your face. Where are we going to put it that's going to make you look younger, right? And that's the typical situation where, patients are coming in wanting to look younger. But of course, we know fillers are also used for contouring, right? So maybe someone younger who doesn't have an aged look just wants more definition in the jawline or the cheekbones or that kind of thing. So what's sort of the long and short on fillers? I think that they're very good for replenishing volume in people who've lost it. I think that, there are limitations in terms of what it can do for, just as an example, older person comes in, jowls, skin sagging, okay? Nasolabial folds they complain about, we can put filler in and sort of camouflage the nasolabial folds, camouflage the jowl by making the jaw look straight across because we put the filler in just in front. But, depending on the degree of aging and how much filler you have to add, the downside of that is you can make the face look fuller. And when you start making the face look fuller down here in someone who's aged, it actually takes away from sort of the feminine, youthful look because this is mainly done in women, men too, but I see mainly women. And, a youthful face is sort of more heart-shaped, which means that the jaw is narrower here and a little bit wider back here, so it goes like that. Whereas when you start filling up here, now this face becomes more square-shaped. And so it's a subtle thing, but, if it's not done properly, it can start to look, bad.
Yeah. What do you think about filler versus like the hyaluronic acid fillers versus fat transfers?
Again, all depends on the situation, right? So the good thing about fillers, and you said just hyaluronic acid, right? So hyaluronic acid,
or even something like what's the other one, Sculptra or whatever. Yeah.
Well, the hyaluronic acid fillers are reversible, so that's always a positive, right? Because God forbid we don't like something, we can get rid of it. Can't really do that with Radiesse, can't really do that with Sculptra, and it's really hard to do it with fat. The upside of fat, and I happen to be a little bit of an expert in that area because I don't know if you
noted.
I don't know. I don't know if you knew this, but there was a plastic surgeon who is one of the pioneers in fat grafting. His name is Dr. Sidney Coleman. And he and I were associates and practiced together for about 2 years. And I'm only one of 2 people in the whole world that he ever trained in his methods of what he does. And so I still use his techniques to this day. So, when fat is done well, it's potentially permanent because it's a graft. So you've taken cells from one place, you put them in another place, they pick up blood supply and they live. So that's the beauty of that. You don't have to repeat it, whereas you have to repeat fillers over time. You have to maintain that. The downside of fat is that it can be a little bit unpredictable at times, okay? So for example, if you're doing it in a super sensitive area like the under eyes, right? If you get the slightest, we take all these precautions for these things not to happen, but if you get the slightest globule of fat that sort of takes root and lives there, you could see a little lump. It's hard to get rid of that lump, all right? So, but then if, let's say you're doing fat for the cheekbones, I mean, that's much more forgiving because you don't have a thin-skinned area that's very delicate, that kind of thing. You can, as long as you're doing it well artistically and not overfilling, you get great results from like filling the face. So again, different applications for different things. But fillers themselves, I think, have a great role. I think the problem is just when we do them poorly, which to me means kind of overdoing it, right? That's where the problem comes. But I think they have a great role in both facial rejuvenation and sort of augmentation for certain purposes. I mean, some women, for example, a very common thing is filling the lips, okay? If you fill their lips properly, it can look fantastic. But then there's that fine line where you don't want to go to looking ducky and that kind of thing. So, I think that answers it, which is that fillers can be great, but it's just like everything. It's got to be done artistically and well.
Another question that I had, because I feel like there's if somebody wanted a facelift, they think like facelifts like, oh my God, I can never afford a facelift. So they do things like they're doing the PDO threads, they'll do the filler, they'll do the RF microneedling, they'll do all these sorts of like, I guess, temporary. Well, facelift is kind of temporary too, right? A little in a sense, but
10 years temporary.
Yeah, not as temporary as these things. At what point if somebody's really trying to maximize their budget, at what point do you realize like, all right, I got to stop fooling around with these like temporary things. I need a facelift. Yeah. Or should you hold off on doing some of these temporary things and just kind of just go for the gusto?
That's a really great question. One that's like a little tricky to answer. I mean, I think that it depends upon the degree of facial aging, right? So, because this is a conversation I have all the time. I'll see somebody who comes in, face is really dropped, pretty moderate or severe nasolabial folds, same with the jowling situation, maybe volume loss. I tell those people, I mean, the amount of filler you'd have to pump your face with to get yourself right. And then the other thing is that you're going to end up probably pumping yourself up so much to get that lifting effect of the skin that it's going to look terrible, right? So when you've got that sort of degree of facial aging, I mean, you probably need to go to the facelift. But and again, this is not a steadfast rule book. Okay, let's take somebody maybe mid-30s, 40s, all right? Probably not the huge degree of skin laxity, that kind of thing. Those are usually the people that do better with some fillers to maybe camouflage nasolabial folds a little bit and jowls and stuff, and maybe just a little augmentation in the cheeks. So it's, it's super hard to give rules for the whole gamut of people we see, but you mentioned PDO threads too. Those they're not great. Definitely temporary, couple months. You want me to explain to you why they're temporary? Because you might not know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically when we do a facelift, we're elevating the skin and maybe a layer underneath it, and we're creating a raw surface, and then we're sort of moving all that backward and kind of asking it to stick down and it heals in that place. With threads, you're not creating any new surface, right? So you're literally just pulling everything, and when that thread dissolves, it just goes right back because you haven't actually, you know, created a surgical area for things to be sort of moved on and then to adhere to through the healing process. So, you know, I tell people sort of the lesser invasive things like maybe skin tightening machines, that kind of thing. When you have minimal aging changes and you are realistic and expect minimal effects from it, because none of these things really, you know, have super significant impactful. And I can't tell you how many people I see, they come to me, oh, I did Morpheus 8 or I did this, whatever, and it didn't do anything for me. And now they're ready for the facelift.
It hurts. It hurts.
And it hurts, yeah. Well, anyway, listen, so we have to wrap up today.
Yes.
It's been great having you here.
Thank you.
And who knows, maybe someday you'll have me on your station.
Definitely be there.
All right. Yes. Thanks for coming, Danielle. Appreciate it.
My station?
Let me fix that. Channel. And maybe someday you'll have me on your channel.
I was like, okay, Grandpa.
Oh, boy.
That was really
Showing
good.
my age.
Let me show you what I looked like before I had. No, but he faked it out. He was like, "Oh, I'm so bad at this," and then he like
that
crushed
wasn't a fake
it.
Ask them, they know.
Oh
For
my
some
God.
reason, I pulled it together today.
Hey, where's my? That filler did me a little good, huh? Filler, and then I got rid of the hyperpigmentation, and then we did a prescription hydroquinone, and then a couple of like, what was the peel?